What is crack-a-lacking, fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Valley coming at you with yet another podcast for this week. We have a trade reaction we'll kick off with, and then we'll get into our listener-driven 2023 NBA mock draft. First and foremost, though, please remember to subscribe to us wherever you're consuming us. Hit that sub button on YouTube, like our videos, comment, even if I'm not responding to all your comments. Help the algorithm love us back. If you've not subscribed on Apple, Spotify, if you're checking us out for the first time, please hit that permanent sub button, leave ratings and reviews on iTunes or Apple, Those help us out a crap load. Join our Discord. The link to that is in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. Check out our merch. Currently rocking a Thermonuclear AF sweatshirt that's purple, blue, and lime green. How do you not love that stuff? And follow us on the socials at Hardwood Knocks on TikTok and Twitter, at Hardwood_Knocks on Instagram. And if you're finding us via TikTok or Instagram or just another medium, and that's how YouTube, just let us know. And if you've done all those things, I would love to know if people are coming over from TikTok and Instagram, if these videos are working, especially since our TikTok it's not blowing up, but we have like an actual following there now. So just let me know. And if you've done all those things, please recommend us to friends, family members, enemies, random people on the street, coworkers, anyone who might like hoops. Shout us out on Twitter. That can help get the word out as well. And I will engage/respond to you most of the time. That is it on the housekeeping notes. And so before we get to our listener-driven mock draft, I did participate in as an emergency selector for certain teams, but it was, the heavy lifting was done by our fantastic listeners in the Discord. So again, go in the Discord. And to our Discord members, I see your mailbag questions coming in. It's a time of year where I'm going to have to wait for things to settle down before we get back in the mailbag groove. We're trying to pump out offseason primers for every team. I have this going on, so be patient, and you can feel free to answer each other's questions in there until I announce another mailbag episode. With that, let's get to this trade, though. It felt like a longer intro, and it was only 2 minutes long. I'm proud of myself. Let's all give Dan a round of applause. So the trade between I guess we should talk about the Scuttle trade very quickly. It was initially involved the Clippers, the Wizards, and the Celtics. The machinations were similar, but the original Scuttle trade had Kristaps Porzingis going to the Celtics, Gallinari going to the Wizards, Malcolm Brogdon going to the Clippers, Marcus Morris, number 30, and Amir Coffey going to the Wizards. Just a whole bunch of 3-team, not nonsense, but those were the machinations. The Clippers pulled out because they were worried about Brogdon's medicals. Within a few hours, I don't even know the timeline, but after that comes out that the trade is dead, the Celtics, Grizzlies, and Wizards struck a trade. The Celtics are getting Kristaps Porzingis, the number 25 pick, and the Warriors 2024 first rounder. That comes via Memphis. It's top 4 protected next year, then top 1 protected in 2025, and then unprotected in 2026. Porzingis is opting in, picking up that $36 million player option as part of this deal. The Celtics can, of course, extend him, I think, under the old extension rules, which they're still going to be held to. He's at 105%, but under the new, once the CBA kicks in, they can actually sign him to a deal that's less than that. I guess he could have declined his option though, but regardless, they can extend him. This is a deal I think you make with looking at the return. Well, we'll get into it. So Celtics get Kristaps, number 25, and the Warriors 2024 first. The Grizzlies are getting Marcus Smart. The Wizards are getting Tyus Jones, Danilo Gallinari, Mike Muscala, the number 35 pick. And I think they'll generate about a $12.5 million traded player exception. John Hollinger did point this out on Twitter. It'd be interesting to see whether they can fold this into some sort of Phoenix Suns mega deal with Bradley Beal and try to generate an even larger traded player exception, because those large exceptions will be super valuable if you're far enough beneath the tax and teams are looking to dump salary in advance of the new CBA penalties that are kicking in. So we'll start with, I want to go all over the place here. That's why I was stammering at the beginning. I think this was place to start, believe it or not, is the Wizards, which just to sort of, I don't want to blow through them, but I think that they're important here. This just proves, we knew it already, but they are in full-on rebuilding mode. I saw some people trolling that they didn't even get a first-round pick when moving KP. Here's how I look at it. One, you were getting number 30 and you got number 35. That's not this huge difference. Yes, you're overloaded with these guards 1 and 2s right now. Chris Paul, Tyus Jones, Monte Morris, DeLon Wright. It's not going to stay that way. Johnny Davis, you want to throw him in there? It's not going to stay that way. They're going to move these guys. Maybe Chris Paul gets waived or bought out. It's not this is not the roster. And even if you go into the season with Tyus Jones, DeLon Wright, and Monte Morris, you can flip all those guys for value. I would think Monte Morris and DeLon Wright are worth some pretty good seconds. And I bet you could probably get a protected first round pick from Tyus Jones. I've actually wondered where, if you're willing to eat the medicals at this point, is there a Brogdon Tyus Jones framework? Just because I still think the Boston needs more of a game manager. We will get to Boston and Memphis, though. Washington doesn't take on any long-term salary as part of this deal. Shout out to Mike Muscala, who got his team option picked up, which he probably wouldn't have if not for this trade. I'm assuming Gallinari will either be used as ballast in a different deal, or maybe he'll get bought out at some point just because he's come back from that ACL injury, doesn't fit the Wizards timeline. Maybe they try and hold on to him anyway because of the salary floor rules, or if they want to move him at the trade deadline. They could also just play him if they need bodies, and that could help him reboot his stock. I still think he could be pretty effective as sort of a pure scoring four. We have to see how much juice he has left after the latest knee injury, though. I think what the Wizards are doing is okay. And I went on Brian Toporek, the NBA podcast. And I also went into New York City on Wednesday to go on Mort Jurgensen's show, who's his co-host. So be on the lookout for that. They have a TV show. It's back in Denmark, but they release it on the internet in English. And he was credentialed, went to the NBA draft and everything. So I went, met him. We had a fantastic chat, 45 plus minutes. I digress. But I was talking to Brian Toporek about this. He took exception to people calling the Wizards trade of Bradley Beal good. They didn't get a first round pick. All they did was essentially dump him into salary, and it cost them all these other, or dump him for salary cap relief over the long term. And they just essentially ate it, and they got out of a deal that they authored themselves. And he's right, because Ted Leonsis is still a part of this. We know per the reporting from Candace Buckner of the Washington Post that Ted Leonsis was bragging about the no trade clause as evidence of good relationships between star and franchise. Yeah, they gave him a supermax. I think that's Bradley Beal. Good for Bradley Beal. Ecstatic that he was able to negotiate that. Shout out to his agent, Mark Bartelstein, too. But like, you didn't need to give him the no trade clause. You were giving him a supermax. So there's no reason to brag about that. You're bragging how bad of a negotiator you are. And so I do understand that, and that you missed so many times, Leonsis included in this, because he is still there, on trading Bradley Beal for peak value. And so you kind of watched his trade value deteriorate over the next 3 or 4 years because there's either less time on his contract, or now his contract became so large and included a no trade clause that you were boxed into this corner. However, we can't penalize Michael Winger, the new president of Monumental Basketball, for the sins of the past regime. I wouldn't call that a good trade. I would call it a necessary trade, because you got out of the Bradley Beal business long term. You freed up so much money on your books that you can use to build out the roster either through free agency or trades to kind of stack upon your assets. And that's the Kristaps Porzingis moves as an extension of that. Michael Winger wasn't the one who decided not to move Porzingis at the deadline. And so when you get to the offseason, options are available, but you're like, signing trades aren't necessarily easy to negotiate. There wasn't a clear team out there that would have wanted Kristaps Porzingis at a longer term number and would have given you money to do assets to do so in the process. A lot of those teams, or some of the teams that were most interested in him, might have had cap space. Like if the Rockets wanted to take a look at him, I don't think the Jazz would have been interested. The Pacers would have been interested. And that's also part of the problem, is you go through these teams. So where was Porzingis' leverage to force a sign and trade? Do you run into the bird rights trap of, well, could he have just gone somewhere else anyway? And we were compelled to match that contract to just get out of this without taking on any long-term money. And you get a second round pick, and then you get someone in Tyus Jones, who I'd argue that you could move for, I would think, the equivalent of the number 35 pick, just because he plays. Porzingis is the better player, but he is just so low turnover. And by the way, there was the stat tweeted out. I can't remember who it was on Twitter, that the Wizards now have the 3 best assist to turnover ratio guards in the league on their roster in Tyus Jones, Monte Morris, and Chris Paul. That's hysterical. We'll see how long that lasts. I like the idea of just, you ripped off the Band-Aid. We'll see what happens with Kyle Kuzma. We'll see what happens with Denny Avdia's extension and his future in Washington. You are starting from this blank slate to where it's the number 8 pick on Thursday when this is getting released, and you'll go from there. But I like the mindset here, and you cleared a ton of runway for yourself long term. And so while you might look at these as you don't have to call them good trades or great trades. They were necessary trades if you wanted to hit the reset button. They didn't do anything to damage your future or present. And if anything, they elevated your future asset stats just a little bit. Maybe the pick swaps and the seconds from Phoenix come in handy. Who knows? So I think that this one is easier to like. than the Bradley Beal one because Porzingis was headed to free agency. If not this, like maybe he was always going to opt in, but would you have felt the pressure to extend him? What would the value have been for him at the deadline when he had half a season left and you just had to worry about paying him? You didn't get a first round pick here, but I would argue you got the equivalent between number 35 and Tyus Jones. And if I think we could still see them move, you combine those two, I think you get in the first round this year if you want to pretty easily. So good piece of business, as the dunked on kids or guys would say. And I just agree. I like that the Wizards are finally, even if they're not in the greatest situation right now, I like that they're sort of just pulling off the Band-Aid here. I think we can just loop Boston and Memphis together on this one, although I got to tackle this from the Memphis Grizzlies perspective. I saw a lot of Twitter on Marcus Smart immediately replaces Dillon Brooks' defense and then some, gives them a better passer and then a better shooter at the position. Dillon Brooks over the last 3 years actually shot better on catch and shoot threes than Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart has been over 40% from mid-range the past 3 seasons, while Dillon Brooks is comfortably below 40%. They're both some of the most damaging pull-up shooters statistically in the NBA. The main difference there is it does feel like Smart goes on these heaters more frequently, but he takes pull-up jumpers, including like, from mid-range, factoring all off the dribble jumpers. Dillon Brooks attempts over the past 3 seasons, basically more than twice as many as Marcus Smart. And so you are limiting the damage that will be inflicted because he's not taking as many of those kinds of shots. And so then you factor in the passing. He is a better passer. He can still be turnover prone. I don't trust him, to always make the right decision out of like the pick and roll. He's never been that type of a point guard. And I think the issue here is you gave up 2 first-round picks, and you could just argue that you've now used so many of your own first-round picks. How far were those going to go for you anyway? Which it's number 25, and the Warriors should still be good next season. Marcus Smart's going to be good for you for a while. I think he is the better defender. It's just he's going to give you, like, he can defend capably 1 through 4, where I don't think Dillon Brooks could really hold up against a lot of the bigger fours, maybe on the block as well. So I like Marcus Smart better there. But part of this opportunity cost is you didn't trade Dillon Brooks. You're letting him walk for nothing, presumably. And look, Smart's money, by the way, is fine if anyone cares about that. He has 3 guaranteed years left on his deal. Valued at about, he said 18.6 next year, which is fine with the cap going up. And then it's on an escalating scale, but 3 years and $60 million basically for Marcus Smart. I think that's fair value when you look at his age and what he does. And to have the supplemental playmaking, I don't know how often he and Ja can play together. What will the Grizzlies spacing look like? I think that, do you think that you can trust Marcus Smart off the catch more or to take the right kinds of shots more, as I mentioned previously? Perhaps. So I don't hate this for Memphis, but part of the opportunity cost was giving up Tyus Jones, who is a better game manager than Marcus Smart. He's not going to throw as complicated of passes. He's not going to take as many chances. That's also part of his charm. I don't think you can trust him more as a pull-up jumper from in between. We really saw him work in some off-the-dribble threes this past season. So I do think you are losing something there. And it's probably not as noticeable when Ja Morant's in the lineup. But Ja Morant is basically, you just pencil him in for whatever reasons now, including injuries, like missed 20 games or whatever every season. So that's not nothing. And to give up Tyus Jones, who has value on his own, I know he was going to the final year of his deal at $14 million, and then 2 first-round picks, I don't think it's a bad trade for the Grizzlies. If I had to pick, I don't even want to say if I had to pick a loser, because I don't think anyone lost this trade. I kind of understand it and like it for all 3 teams. I have the most questions about Memphis. I do have some questions with Boston too. Washington's the only one where I'm like, you're leaning into this teardown. Good, great, grand, wonderful. Just keep going. I'm so curious as to see what the offense is going to look like, both without Ja and then when Ja comes back. And this is all to say, if there are going to be people in the YouTube comments, which is where I feel like we get the most anger, that are saying I'm being too hard on the Grizzlies here, we have an entire offseason still to go through. So let's see how they flesh out the rest of the roster. And people are looking at Marcus Smart as a wing. And defensively, sure, if you want to call him a wing. Offensively, no, that is not what he is. And you still need that 3-and-D guy who can also put the ball on the floor, because Marcus Smart does not skew 3-and-D. Like it's it sometimes feels like he can be like this big time shot maker. And he had that year, was it 2 years ago or something? He shot an astronomical percentage on his off the dribble 3-pointers. That was very much the anomaly. It's not, again, he's taking them. This isn't circa Draymond Green has the one good shooting season and then doesn't even take them or is shooting, like just ghastly percentages, but he can be erratic from beyond the arc. He's not, again, he's the better offensive player than Dillon Brooks. But when you're factoring in the loss of Dillon Brooks' defense, getting rid of Tyus Jones on offense, and then giving up these picks, again, part of the value for the Grizzlies might have been Dillon Brooks is able to walk, and we're not going to feel his loss. I think there could be a real drop off offensively, is what I'm getting at, and especially the first quarter of the season without John Morant into the fold. And so I'll be very interested to see how they flesh out the rest of this, the rest of this roster. And if they have, I do think this proves they're not going to be averse to taking some swings, even though John Morant's going to miss more than 25% of the season. But was this their big move? It might not be. They still have all their own picks. And Jaren Jackson Jr. and Marcus Smart as part of your defense, and even having Desmond Bane there and Steven Adams on the court at the same time, that's not going to always be the prettiest offensive lineup, but they're going to do some real damage defensively. And I think if you can get Smart to have one of those seasons where he shoots 36% or something on catch and shoot threes and can hit them at relatively high volume, and John Morant's consistently in the lineup, you can play him and Bane together without John Morant. I think that would go a long way towards cementing sort of the offensive orchestration. But I do think that there's more risk caked in here. And the bigger one would be, you can look at it right now. And I mean, let me bring up their salary cap sheet. With the number of players they have for guaranteed salaries next year, you add Marcus Smart into the fold, you're at basically the roster limit already before factoring in the number 25 pick. If you're going to pick up Tillman's team option or decline it and re-sign him in restricted free agency, we know Brandon Clark's probably not going to play next year. But still, the only player leaving from last year guaranteed to leave is Dillon Brooks at this point. So it's not like you had all this roster room. And so you punted on the number 25 pick. I don't care. That's fine. The Warriors first rounder is interesting because I think you can look at it and say, okay, they weren't great this year, but if they're going to run it back, they should still be pretty good. So what are they giving up? The 19th pick again? Is it even do you think you're giving up a lottery pick? And if not, maybe you don't care. And so the opportunity cost here is reasonable because of the salary of Marcus Smart on for the next 3 years. But, are we getting to a point where, I don't want to say is Marcus Smart on the decline, but he wasn't even Boston's best guard last year. That was very clearly Derek White. And so he turned 29 this past March. So it'll be his age 29 campaign next year. It's like he's getting to that point where could you start to see just a little bit of a drop off? I think there's just more concern here overall for the Grizzlies. I don't hate the trade. And overall, I like the Marcus Smart mentality coming to Memphis. I don't, from a spacing perspective, with or without John Morant, I don't love it. And I do question his ability to manage the offense in John Morant's absence. I think you very much need to go out and find another floor. Can you get Trey Jones, get Tyus, his brother, who's in restricted free agency from San Antonio? Will he sign for the mid-level exception? The Spurs will match that. I'm kidding if anyone didn't catch that. Or are you just banking on, okay, Desmond Bane is just going to take another leap, and we have Luke Kennard and Bane for the spacing. Jaren Jackson Jr. is still going to stretch the floor for his position. If we roll with a bunch of Jaren Jackson Jr. at the 4 again, so we're just going to play with 3 guaranteed shooters. We could throw Santi Aldama in there if we want to. So you can get to some 4-out combinations. You're never going to play 4 out though with John Morant and Marcus Smart. And the goal would have been, hey, can we get someone who's doesn't have to be Marcus Smart level defensively, but doesn't potentially shrink the floor on certain nights or make as many mistakes as a ball handler? Again, better player than Dillon Brooks, better overall player than Tyus Jones. I question just his offensive value to this team. And again, doesn't mean they lost the trade. It just means that I have questions, which I think, look, it's fair to have questions. We got to let these things play out, though. I am excited. I didn't have to do grades at Bleacher Report for this, by the way, because the trade got just fucking blown to smithereens. So that would have been live, and having to fix it and redo it would have just been annoying. So RIP to anyone's trade grades that actually were published as a result. So the third and final aspect of this deal is the Celtics, which when you look at when you looked at the reaction, everyone, I think, pretty much just agreed that the Celtics won this trade. They gave up Marcus Smart and in a second round pick and just in salary Drek or Flotsam and got Kristaps Porzingis, who's coming off an amazing season. He was, the rim protection, the 3-point shooting, but he was hitting ridiculous fallaways, off the dribble jumpers. When he was healthy, he was spectacular that season. By far and away the best season of his career. Really, his mobility on defense specifically too, he's always kind of had that, even with the ball, there's a fluidity. There's like a slashing fluidity to what he can do both on and off the ball. But on defense, like that was there. And it felt like you hadn't seen that since maybe his, like, I don't know, early onset days, not rookie, maybe a little bit after his rookie season in New York. You have him on an expiring contract. So yes, you could extend him. And if you do, it's probably at a palatable number, I would guess at this point. But there's no risk involved here because he's coming off the books. And so, yes, now you have Al Horford and you have Robert Williams III and you have Kristaps Porzingis. It's really not as, and we'll get into the Grant Williams element of all this. It's really not as egregious as it sounds. Like when you're looking at financially, Al Horford and Robert Williams III next season are going to combine to make under $25 million. You have Al Horford just did a flat 10. His salary went from 26.5 to that extension was 10 million. And then Robert Williams III is at 11.5, so they're under 22 million. So you throw Kristaps Porzingis is 36 into the fold, and let's just say on top of 22, $58 million for your three primary bigs is not like, it's not egregious. It's a lot of money, but it's not like out of this world egregious. And I think you do this. The two reasons that you make this trade is, one, you do believe that RW3 can play with either one of these guys. And we at least know that they're willing to try playing him with Horford, even though Joe Mazzulla wasn't as much about that as his predecessor, Ime Udoka. You could still try and get away with Porzingis or Al Williams III against her. I don't know that I would love it. Al Horford is definitely a better defender in space than Porzingis, but maybe at that point you trust RW3 to kind of go out and switch a little bit more and have Porzingis playing his role and help around the basket. You can do stuff like that. Porzingis is going to space the floor, and so now you just have open-ended access to 4-out lineups. You could try playing Horford and Porzingis at the same time, not something I mentioned. I do believe that this is sort of okay, like we're going to play two bigs at some point, or we're confident they're going to play together, or we're not confident that all these guys are going to play in a ton of games at the same time. And so RW3 always has health issues. Al Horford is getting up there in age. Porzingis, he's had a great year and a half or whatever of good health. Historically, he's just had a ton of lower body injuries, and so he's going to miss time, which does make extension talks an interesting calculus. I do, when you look at what certain front courts could become, you might leave a lot of heavy lifting on your guards and wings here to say, hey, you really need to crash the glass, because if you're going to go with Porzingis as your 5 or Porzingis as your, I guess Porzingis and Horford, yeah, in theory, those are not the greatest rebounders for their positions. And if you play them together, I don't know if that helps or if that makes it worse. If you play one of them with RW3, even though he's the shortest of these three, right? Because Al Horford's taller than 6'9". But so there is some concern there, but it's just you can totally get by with it. And so I at least like the gamble in theory. I think it does depend on Kristaps streamlining his role a little bit more. He had a lot of freedoms in Memphis this year. I do think he will get that in Boston, because in theory they did need another creator, and that's a concern that we'll have to get to. They could have used another one, and he looked like that dude, not much of a facilitator, but in terms of getting his own shots, that gives you another bailout weapon and someone who was more efficient creating his own shots last year than a Marcus Smart, and someone who's going to be more comfortable doing it because he can shoot over the top of so many people than a Derek White. And so where you get that downhill element from Malcolm Brogdon, you can get the perimeter fall away element from Porzingis. That's ways that even Horford isn't going to help you. And just the pick and pop game should be divine here for Boston. Is he willing to go back into a role where he's going to have to could 80% of his baskets go back to coming off assists, which I probably should have looked at that before I jumped on here. I don't know if I would think that's substantially a higher amount than he was at while he was in Washington last year. 71% of his baskets came off assists. So that's not, there doesn't have to be much streamlining here. There's just, he might not have as much freedom in the post or to go to those fallaways. Those might get cut down a little bit because do his minutes dip from 32 and a half that he was at last year? And is he just going to be playing in lineups, say Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown? Bradley Beal missed a bunch of time last year, and there just wasn't a whole lot of talent in Washington overall, though he did play with Kuzma. The spacing in Boston should be better, even if you are trying to get away with him playing RW3. So I like the gamble. I still have questions about it. I do think Boston really did diminish its table setting depth at this point. And Grant and I have talked a lot about how we really believe they need, even if it's just a situational offensive organizer like a Tyus Jones, a Monte Morris, or if you could get Chris Paul if he's waived and he's willing to sign for the minimum. Someone who can give you some balance and structure in crunch time when you're getting nudged out of your process and you're prone to, if it's Jaylen Brown's handles or Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, bad passes, or just settling early in the shot clock or never getting below the 3-point line before you're inside 5 seconds of the shot clock. Just someone to direct in those situations in the half court overall so that you're not as reliant on either tough 3-pointers or just almost being perfect in your process. And now you got rid of Marcus Smart, who was probably your best passer, second best passer, like at worst. It did very much feel like this was a team that didn't have an alpha playmaker. And so you can look at it and say, okay, like Marcus Smart was never that floor general anyway, but now you've cut down your secondary options. And it's, you have Jason Tatum, you have Derek White, you can still run some stuff through Al Horford. And like there's value there. We know that RW3 can make those quick decisions with the ball off the catch, but like you're not going to run stuff through him. It feels like they're going to be either, this could be a vote of confidence in Peyton Pritchard, who either wanted a trade or a bigger role. You still have like guards and White, Brogdon, and then of course like Brown, Tatum, if they log any time, technically the two. Forget about the positions. Could get a little crowded for him, but is this a vote of confidence in him? Do you trust him to do that now? And if he's not going to play a bigger role, you're really just relying on the Malcolm Brogdon, who's more of just like downhill and let's create stuff that way. Derek White, more of a connective guy. Jason Tatum, just sort of like, he's not a reactive passer anymore. He's better than that, but he's not on the level of Devin Booker. He's not on the he's probably like more McKen. I feel like, no, I don't want to say he's probably like more Kevin Durant or Kawhi Leonard. It feels maybe a notch below those guys at their peak of passers, which is just fine. So that is a question. We still have an offseason to go through, though. And now they have these other first-round picks, number 25, which it's nice to get cost-controlled guys when by the way, they're adding $7 million in payroll. So if they keep just by keeping Grant Williams' cap hold, they're going to blow past, what's the number I had them at here, $185 million in salary next year. So that is above the second apron. They won't have their mid-level. But that's a lot of money for this roster. You can still, under these, you're still going to be like, there are some new trade rules that are kicking in, so you'll be hard pressed to make other deals, but you pick up these 2 first-round picks that, okay, do we hope that we get value at a number 25? Or we keeping the Warriors pick? But you have all your own picks after this draft. There's a swap with San Antonio on 28, but you still have a pick. You can trade a bunch of picks if you want to now. And do you bring back a player? I'm not saying that they're going to go and enter the Damian Lillard sweepstakes, which have apparently closed. I didn't even know they were open, whatever. They're not going to go out and try and get Trae Young. They're not going to be a team because they do have Brogdon still, who was traded and wasn't anymore. So you can get some pretty aggressive salary matching, but they have other moves left in them depending on what they deem is necessary. So maybe I think at this point they might wait and try like angle for a bigger splash to see if they need it around the trade deadline and see where where their talent lies right now. And it's not just a matter of, okay, Porzingis coming in healthy can go through training camp with them. It's now Joe Mazzulla can go through the entire offseason process, the preseason process, knowing that he's the head coach and that their staff is adequately fleshed out now. And I think that can make a big deal for their offense as well. And so I wouldn't be shocked if they turned around and said, hey, we have Brogdon's salary that's just still floating around here. And that's going to give us, like, even if you have to do I think it's 110%, the matching is going to go. The CBA is all over the place. I apologize. But once it's released and it's a process for me to study it, like we'll get it, but like 110% of his $22.5 million, that's fine. Like you can get a really good player if you're going to attach a first round pick to that, I would assume. Teams could be concerned with his medicals, but he only has 1 year at $22.5 million in addition on this one. So it's a short-term risk. I don't know who the player is, but there might just be opportunities that arrive of teams that aren't willing to spend. And we've now seen that, like, if you're Boston, if you're Phoenix, regardless of whether you maybe don't like how much Phoenix gave up or that trade or yada, 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 you can get real talent if they're expensive without giving up back-breaking returns, because there are teams that are probably so concerned about these new financial penalties or limitations that are going to kick in over the next year plus. So you don't know what opportunities could arrive. It could arise this offseason. It could arrive at the trade deadline. And so now you have these extra picks to fool around with. The Warriors one is like the clear mystery box, because you could see real regression from the Warriors just because everyone's getting older. And like, are they going to be able to, can they make any meaningful changes when they're going to be so cash strapped? It's not some sort of, I don't know if it's like a diamond. It's like there are teams that might want it. They probably, if you had to pick between Boston's 2024 pick or Golden State's, yeah, you're going to pick Golden State's. But in terms of like anchoring a blockbuster, it would have to be one of many. But you can still do something pretty big here. And so I like it. I like it for the Wizards the most because it just shows they have a concrete direction. I like it for Boston the second most, and then Memphis would clearly be third for me. I don't hate it for any team. I just think that Memphis took the biggest gamble here is where I end up with that. That's it for the trade analysis. We'll talk more about what Denver is doing and moving their picks around, but I think it's important that we get to this mock draft. And so the way that I ran this, it was more of a last minute. So we didn't have time to like try and run through the whole transaction process, but we had people in Discord sign up for teams. A lot of people or a handful of people had 2 teams, and they drafted. We just went through it. They did it by a doc. There was one trade that went through. Hopefully I won't forget about it because I didn't mark it down anywhere. And everyone provided a line or two of adjustable. Actually, I don't know how much they provided because I clicked on it and tried to make sure that as many people as possible submitted them, but I decided to just react to it in real time. I've done enough draft prep work to where I probably know something of like I have general impressions of most of these guys. And if I don't, you know what, like I'm just going to say it. I will apologize for any pronunciation issues, but I'm very interested to see how this turns out. I've seen it. Like, this is not, I know who was drafted. I know that I don't want to spoil. Like, I know there was a surprise that, okay, so-and-so wasn't drafted, but it wasn't egregious when you look at where he's sort of mocked around the NBA. But so let's get to it. And I'll shout out everybody who did this. And I'll open and go through the explanations as we go along. I will try and read as many as possible, and I'll just provide my reactions. And so we begin with the San Antonio Spurs at number 1. Glad was the GM, Spurs fan. And look, this was a tough decision, but they ultimately went with Victor Wembanyama. Glad says, pretty self-explanatory. On an actual note, Wemby gives what they need most, a player with superstar potential you could build around. Wemby also allows the rest of San Antonio's young core to play more in their proper roles, moving Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell to secondary and tertiary scoring options. Defensively, Wemby becomes the rim protector that SA lacks after trading away Jakob Poeltl, while also giving flexibility to switch and guard 2 through 5. There's a lot of defensive potential between Wemby, Sohan, and Vassell. This is the reason why the Spurs tanked this season, to have the opportunity to draft a franchise cornerstone. Somehow they lucked into the best generational talent since LeBron. Yeah, no reaction there other than I am wondering if having Wemby and Sohan and Vassell somehow makes Keldon Johnson expendable down the line or immediately, or if they just move him into a 6-man role. That'll be interesting to see. Number 2, Charlotte. We have Mike Hirinshin. I apologize if I butchered that. He selected Brandon Miller. And a lot of people think this is what Charlotte will ultimately do. The Hornets could use Kelly Oubre Jr. in free agency, could lose Kelly Oubre Jr. in free agency, Mike writes, and have to wait 30 games before Miles Bridges is allowed on an NBA floor. They actually do have to wait 10. They're counting 20 of the games that he missed last season towards it, but still the same point. You don't technically know if he's going to be back. He's a free agent. Mike continues, their forwards are Cody Martin and declining Gordon Hayward. This seems like a no-brainer, getting a 6'9" combo guard to pair with LaMelo. I don't disagree about the fit, but just because of Scoot Henderson's it factor when you watch him on the ball, I don't know if Brandon Miller has that same it factor. If you think he gets there, or you just trust his size where he doesn't need to put the same amount of pressure on the basket or get the same amount of separation. I think you can justify it. I've been way higher on Scoot personally, but I do know that there are people that I respect and read way smarter than I who just really believe that there isn't this huge gap between them. I do think this seems like it'll be more reflective of what the Hornets do, though. Henry had the Portland Trailblazers at number 3. They took Scoot Henderson. The Trailblazers would be licking their chops if Scoot was available at 3, Henry wrote. No matter which way they want to go on the Damian Lillard situation, Scoot gives them either a great trade chip or a foundation action AI piece to start over with. Yeah, and I think that he and Damian Lillard could play together for the same reason I think LaMelo and Scoot could play together. Like, those are Damian Lillard and LaMelo Ball can both shoot off the catch, and just I think that we're underselling Scoot's skills to think that he can't work without the ball in his hands, especially as a rookie. If anything, having that other alpha ball handler could streamline his development. Now, do I want to see Damian Lillard play on a team that's going to compete for 47 games and then tank the other 35? Not necessarily, but I would like to see Damian Lillard play with Scoot Henderson. I'm not going to lie, that wouldn't be something that doesn't intrigue me. Next up, the Houston Rockets at number 4. Anthony was the GM. He took Amen Thompson. Wrote with the 4th pick, the Rockets select Amen Thompson, and it's an easy one. Amen flashes high playmaking chops along with insane athleticism. He's a point guard in a small forward's body and is an instant paint touch on his drives. He gets to the rim at will, and with his athleticism, it's hard to see that not translating. The playmaking would be a godsend for the Rockets, who lack a true table setter, as long as they continue to refuse to give Şengün the ball. That is strong cosign there. Amen would slide in perfectly and set up the talented roster with easy shots. His shooting is atrocious, but even if it never improves, you're looking at a possibly taller Russell Westbrook ceiling. No, yeah, I don't disagree with this. My question would be, does his jumper develop, and does his paint pressure, is it impacted by a lack of shooting on Houston's roster, which they have the cap space and assets to theoretically address? I think it becomes ultra important to address them, though, immediately if you want to come in and make him your primary ball handler. It also makes life easier on Jalen Green, and even nudging Kevin Porter Jr. off the ball more makes his life a lot easier. I don't know that I love the idea of Amen Thompson on a team with James Harden, though. Something to consider. At number 5, Rhett Bauer had the Pistons. He selected Amen's brother, Ausir Thompson. The Pistons take Ausir Thompson 5th overall, while I strongly considered Cam Whitmore to fill a massive vacancy for the Pistons as a freak athlete who can shoot and defend. I think Ausir has a comparable ceiling with improvement areas that can more realistically be worked on. Cade and Ivy can create advantages and pass or shoot out of them. So maybe Whitmore's lack of feel or passing vision wouldn't be a problem, but I don't believe you can really teach that as much as shooting. So adding a player that can create advantages and pass in Thompson will make their offense incredible. His lack of a shot is a concern, especially next to a core of non-elite shooters in Cade, Ivy, and Duren, but the talent is too much for me to pass on. This is interesting here. When you're looking at the fit, I don't think he's the best. He wouldn't be on the top of my big board here either. But when I went back and watched these two between Amen and Ausir, and I changed the pronunciation of Ausir or Sar. I apologize for that. I listened to it back too when Adam Spinella has been saying it. Apologize for messing it up. But I look at his jump shot and it feels like it's better and that there's a more fluid process to it than Amen's, where if you're talking about someone who needs to gather off the dribble and fire up, I might almost bet on him having a much better, more efficient jumper long term. And so I don't hate it. And look, I'll say this. I love Cade Cunningham. I think Jaden Ivey had a very strong close to his rookie campaign. This team is not yet good enough, doesn't have the high-end talent enough to be even drafting for fit. So you go with the talent play. And so I would support this pick as well. I'm just going to support this pick because it's one of my favorite prospects in the draft. Jake, with the Magic at number 6, took Anthony Black. Jake wrote, best available option for Orlando, perfect fit to build alongside Banchero, Wagner, and Suggs. Black will improve Orlando's point of attack defense and bring everyone together on offense. The thing I worry about here, and I love Anthony Black's passing, and Grant and I have said a lot that the Magic need an offensive organizer, despite how Magic fans feel about Markelle Fultz. I don't love the fit when you still have shooting concerns with Banchero, even with Suggs a little bit. He got a lot better off the catch last year, though. But Banchero and Fultz. And so how do you move those guys around? You get enough stretch probably from Franz Wagner and Wendell Carter Jr., but are you going to really have... And I trust that Banchero will improve, which is why I'd be all for this. You need to hope that Anthony Black is going to improve his jumper, but to have that big point guard land on a top 10 defense for more than half the year this season, they would be absolute monsters. And so I'd be fine with the upside play here. We go to number 7 from Nick Lachey. Had the Indiana Pacers at number 7. And I guess I wasn't surprised by this one. I'm just not high on him, but the Pacers took Jarris Walker. The Pacers have a glaring need at the 4, and Jarris Walker is the best fit on the board. He's going to be a plus defender on day 1, able to switch up and down due to his length, strength, and agility. Offensively, his 3-point percentage is probably overselling his shooting, but he won't be asked to do too much early on. I also think it very much helps, by the way, that the Pacers can just create all sorts of space the way when you have Miles Turner and Tyrese Halliburton and sort of your bookends on offense. They're going to make things very easy for anyone who comes in. I just worry that Jarris Walker is going to be one of those pure 4s, and I'm probably a little bit lower on what he's going to do as a switch defender at the NBA level defensively. What would he do as a switch defender defensively? My God, I can't even talk right now. I'm tired. The Washington Wizards at number 8 And I'm actually surprised he fell this far, but Cam Whitmore at number 8, selected by, I apologize, we had Darkwing Duck managing the Wizards. With an offseason of uncertainty, the best player available who has the highest ceiling with no regards to fit is the choice that has to be made here. Thus, the choice is Cam Whitmore. Other players in this range could be elite complementary players. Whitmore could be solid, to be a solid to great primary player. Darkwing Duck didn't know what this pick was made before the Bradley Beal trade. I think you make this trip. If anything, you make this pick more so now that Bradley Beal's gone, because my biggest concern for Cam Whitmore is he a good enough passer when he's trying to score off the bounce? Will he be efficient enough? And now it'd probably be nice to have better talent around him, depending on who's coming back, so that it's not all on him, but you really have the freedom to explore with what he's going to do. And so I like this pick. I love this next pick from Carrigan on the Utah Jazz. Went with Taylor Hendricks at number 9. This podcast always talks about how there are like 3 players in the league who bring floor spacing and shot blocking, and that's what Hendricks brings: 2 blocks per game and 40% from 3. Imagine the rim protection with Kessler and Hendricks. I consider taking someone who can run the point guard, but there are going to be a plethora of those guys available at 16. 11 of 10, no notes here. I want to emphasize again the rim protection with Hendricks and Kessler, especially when Hendricks can be more of the roving guy than kind of just that standstill wall. That is a perfect compliment. And so if his 3-point shooting translates, the key here would be, can you get someone who's going to create enough separation and havoc off the dribble to get him those open shots? Because I don't trust him as a passer, and he'd be an iffy self-creator. Love this pick though. We have a trade here. So the Dallas Mavericks at number 10, and let me get to the GM of the Dallas Mavericks first. The GM of the Mavericks was Dennis, and they struck a trade with the Rockets. So the GM was Anthony, and the trade is as follows. The Mavericks get Jayshawn Tate, the number 20 pick, and a 2025 first round pick, top 5 protected, from Houston. And the Rockets get JaVale McGee and number 10. So the Rockets have number 10 here. The Mavericks made it on their behalf, but the Rockets are getting Derek Lively. I understand. I've seen a lot of comparisons to Tyson Chandler with him. And look, if you can get a Tyson Chandler type on your team, I do think the Rockets need, you have Jabari Smith, you have Alperen Şengün, but you need people in the building who care about defense. Jayshawn Tate cares about defense, but there's kind of it feels like they have a glut on the perimeter. Maybe they really don't. They could have a glut up front if you still believe in Usman Garuba and, of course, Şengün and Jabari Smith Jr. I'd be very intrigued to see Lively and Jabari Smith Jr. play together, though. And so that I got to say, we got to see who Dallas with Jayshawn Tate. That makes a lot of sense. He's going to give them some perimeter defense, maybe not too much at the point of attack necessarily right now, but they just need perimeter they need interior defensive bodies as well. And he can play alongside Irving and Doncic. Shooting is still a concern, but he can attack in open space. And look, you got an extra first round pick here. I'm like, whose pick is that, by the way? I don't know what this is. That's not coming up on there. I have to look at Houston's pick commitments, but it looks like it's the Rockets' own in 2025. I thought that they would have owed picks by then. So I'm going to double check that, but I'm sure they put it through the trade.nba. So they have, it's a swap. So Oklahoma City can swap with Houston's, and then that's going to be top 5. It's top 10 protected for that. They're going to have a first round pick. Will they be good enough by then? I don't know. It's a little weird, but you might have a second, you might have a second first round pick that you're getting from this. So to get 2 firsts plus Jayshawn Tate for number 10, I think that's reasonable value. If in real life, I do think the Mavs probably hold out for more, would be my guess. But I thought this was a very creative trade. And they did put in the Discord that I'd never heard of the reporter before. I don't think that reported it, but that this was apparently like a rumored structure the teams had been talking about. So kudos to you two. But the Lively pick, totally. If Houston ends up with him, it does create some weirdness with Jabari Smith, Şengün, and him. But again, that's totally fine. I think you need someone who's going to rim run more efficiently than a Jabari Smith or Garuba, for that matter, if he can even do that, or Şengün. That's not his style. And then, of course, just the defensive capabilities. The Orlando Magic, so we're at Jake. I like this pick too. He went with Grady Dick. And I think people in Orlando, I think I saw, didn't want Grady Dick, which actually kind of surprised me. He's a good movement shooter. He can get really tough shots off. And I think that I don't think he's underrated defensively, so to speak. And also, I'm actually laughing. So Jake said, I hate myself for not picking Leonard Miller here. So we'll get to Leonard Miller and I think a few picks. But he's not as exploitable defensively. I think when I was watching him in advance of the prep I did for the podcast with Coach Spins, there's like he can recover more, like behind the scenes, I'll call it, get to the bucket. And so if you can count on him in more of a team scheme, like, yeah, maybe he gets cooked in certain one-on-one situations, but I don't think he's going to be someone that's eminently targetable. And that might just have to do with his size. So, yeah, I like this pick for Orlando, and they need shooting, especially if they're going to have Anthony Black in there running some point guard. I actually had the number 12 pick with Oklahoma City, and I went with Bilal Coulibaly because I'm going to start the recruitment of Victor Wembanyama to Oklahoma City, 7 to 9 years from now by having his former teammate. But I also really like the defensive tools here, and I've seen him skyrocket up draft boards. I think Sam Frattini's latest mock had him going at 10 to the Mavericks. He wasn't sure if the Mavericks were going to actually be making that pick. He's a workhorse defensively, and I think you're probably going to have to limit what he's doing for you offensively. And that could be a concern with Oklahoma City, who doesn't have like the most pristine spacing, but you have Chet Holmgren coming in. We've seen Giddey improve. Jalen Williams hit enough of his threes. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander should probably take more of them. Like, you can get to lineups, especially with Chet Holmgren coming back, and maybe they sign a front court player who stretches the floors as well, like next to Chet Holmgren. That would make it easier. They're good at like letting guys marinate, like not stretching them too much in their first year if they can't handle it, kind of like comparison to Ousmane Dieng this year, though he did deal with the wrist injury. So I want to see them take a swing, but you are betting on, again, and the Thunder have made this bet that like his jumper needs to come along, and like that's why you have Fred Vinson there. So I like taking the upside play here. Mike is back on the board with the Toronto Raptors, and he took Jordan Hawkins, who's a prospect, who's a prospect I know very little about. Mike writes, the Raptors would love to add Bilal Coulibaly, as he's the exact player Bobby Webster and Masai Ujiri would draft regardless of need. Need is a wing who's somewhere around 6'8" and is not the best shooter. They have a type. However, Sam Presti robbed him of that opportunity and such. Masai immediately starts planning a revenge Shai Gilgeous-Alexander trade. As for Jordan Hawkins, he can shoot. The Raptors have almost negative shooting, so this should be a seamless fit. I would agree. I am like, when you look at what Jordan Hawkins is going to do as a movement shooter, will be fine. Is he going to hold up on defense? Do the Raptors have the infrastructure to cover up for him if he doesn't? Number 14, the New Orleans Pelicans, we had Herb Jones, enjoyer, drafted. I thought this was a great pick. Cason Wallace. They said desiring to make him the next Jrue Holiday and have a future point guard with off-ball catch and shoot ability. That expectation is perfect, because my biggest question is, can he create like scoring off the bounce? But I think that he's just a ferocious defender and is going to score enough without having the ball in his hands, and maybe even get you some like off ball pressure on the basket. And just, if you're going to play him next to Zion Williamson, that really is divine there. And so I think that's a really good pick at number 14, especially when you don't have like a floor general prospect floating around. Kyra Lewis Jr. is entering the final year of his deal. Doesn't seem to have this big time role with the Pelicans. And we know that CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram are kind of these like, Brandon Ingram's like a 2-level scorer. So I guess they're both like 2-level scorers from the perimeter. Cason Wallace might give you one, doesn't need to have the ball as much as a Brandon Ingram or Zion Williamson. And then he just might give you some additional pressure on the basket long term than you get from an Ingram or a CJ McCollum. I like that pick. I made a reach. I was in charge of the Hawks. Adam backed out at the last minute. He had stuff that was going on. Went with Bryce Sensabaugh at number 15 for the Hawks. It's probably a little bit of a reach, but holy scoring. I like that he can get to the rim more. Is he going to hold up on defense and pass better? Are my biggest questions with him. But I think you make the bet where if you bring him into a Hawks team that has Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, even a Bogdan Bogdanovic, you can get to a lot of reasonably like 3 like shooters like on the court with him, depending on where you're going to play. You'll have let's say you have a non-shooting big on the court. You have to trust that DeJounte Murray will knock down threes again this year. That gives him a lot of space to operate and get to the basket and just pump in points. And so I like having that element of upside for Atlanta. And I think he has he is going to be big enough to guard some wing spots on defense. And that's one of the prospects that I've fallen in love with. I did think about this next pick, which I think that Carrigan hit a home run with, looking at the fit and potential. Number 16, the Jazz went with Kobe Buffkin. Carrigan wrote, I was considering Kobe and Casey Wallace at 9, so I'm ecstatic that Kobe fell to 16. I believe he can be the point guard of the future after his monster 6-week stretch at Michigan. Kobe will be an awesome addition, rounding out a potential future 5 of Kobe, Akbaji, Markkanen, Hendricks, and Kessler. Yeah, that's an intriguing 5. Kobe shot like 65% at the rim in the half court this year. Buffkin, that's huge. I think he's going to give you enough pressure defensively, and I think he's going to be someone who can work away from, maybe not as well as Case and Wallace, but like if you need to develop more of to develop more of Markkanen on ball or want to give him more reps, or if you just bring in someone else eventually who needs to be more of an alpha type creator, I think he works in that situation. Christopher had the Lakers at number 17 and took Jet Howard. Writes, scoring and three-point ability off the bench. If he can improve his defensive weaknesses, he should be a solid rotation player. Add in that he's the kid of an NBA player, so that should make his transitional league easier. Look, that's actually fair to point out. Like he's going to come in eyes wide open, presumably. I think a lot of people assume that he'll eventually fall to the Heat just because of Juwan Howard's relationship with Miami. I like that Jet Howard is sort of a multi-level scorer, which you don't have a lot of the complimentary guys in Los Angeles who are doing that. There is even Rui kind of just feels like very, and I'm talking about with the ball in their hands, or even if like off movement, like Rui's going to be like very much try to get to my spot in the mid range. I think Austin Reeves gives you that multi-level capability. D'Angelo Russell, I guess mid-range and threes technically, but will he be back? Like in terms of pure like accessory devices, Jet Howard being that multi-level scorer would be absolutely huge. I do wonder if he would be targeted on defense. I think the Lakers can play so big sometimes. Perhaps it just doesn't matter when you're looking at, if you have Rui and LeBron and Anthony Davis and Jared Vanderbilt, there's a lot of things they could do. Leonard Miller finally goes off the board to Carter, who is in charge of the Miami Heat at number 18. Writes, 2 of the Heat's biggest needs going into next season are length and rebounding. Miller stands at 6'10", making him the tallest player on the Heat right now, and he averaged 10.1 rebounds per game. These, along with his year of familiarity from the NBA three-point line, give him high upside as the coveted 3-and-D power forward the Heat have been in search of. Anyone that can spend some time next to Bam, that gives you some higher upside. I do think also when you look back, and his assist to turnover ratio won't show this, I think he could be like, as someone who's huge and can like actually dribble and has a floor game, I think he's going to be a pretty good passer. He's already an incredible finisher. Can the Heat generate enough spacing to capitalize on that? The jumper, I don't really like. It's going to go down. I'm just curious, like, is he going to, like, how much space does he need to get that? The size will help, but how much time and space does he need to get that off? He did shoot almost 80% at the foul line, though, last year. That's something to look through. I like that pick there. I had Golden State at number 19, and I went with Olivier Maxence Prosper. Just give me long, disruptive defender who I like offensively. I don't think he's ever going to self-create, or at least it won't be like, maybe in the open floor or something, can get end to end. I think you're very much going to like just have to rely on him developing a set jumper, which is fine because the Warriors don't need their non-stars to do anything other than learn to play off the ball. I want someone on this team who's of wing size, who can actually defend like wings and maybe through the point of attack. And that's just like, you're not getting that from Jordan Poole. Klay Thompson's aging out of that. You have Andrew Wiggins, and then maybe is Moses Moody there. So I like this play. I would Golden State use him right away though. I don't know. I mean, like we've seen the development of Moses Moody kind of stunt as well, although he got some run towards the end of the postseason. Kuminga's growth stunt. Weissman was dealing with injuries, so would they play him? I want to see them take like just the defensive tools here. I would be in love with. The Rockets at number 20. So this is going to the Mavericks as part of that trade. Remember, they go with Chris Murray, brother of Keegan Murray. So the Rockets select Chris Murray at pick 20. They then flip him for Derek Lively. Lively gives the Rockets scheme diversity and a true paint protector. He has very limited skills on offense. Blah, 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 blah. So barring a trade, Chris Murray fills a perfect role with the Rockets as well. 6'8" shooting. So for the Mavericks, this is a team that, if you're going to surround Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving with shooting, my question with him would be, can he defend threes? Like he's very much billed as a 3-4. Can he defend NBA wings? Or is he going to just skew more towards like the bigger or slower forwards? And if he can give you real time on the wings, I don't think he's ever going to be your top wing defender. That goes a long way towards the rotation. And I don't think you can go wrong just surrounding Dallas's primaries with shooting. I wonder if he's like projects to be good enough defensively to where if you were going to end up keeping him and not rerouting him somewhere else, it's worth making it. Now, number 20, the value, I think that's fine. And you already picked up Jayshawn Tate if you're Dallas. But I think he's going to be a good pro player. And a lot of people have him being mocked to Sacramento at, what are they, 24? So I guess to get him at 20 is, and look, he's just going to be, if he's playing with Kyrie and Luka, like he's going to be feasting all day. Rhett is up with back-to-back picks for the Brooklyn Nets. So at number 21, Rhett takes Jalen Hood-Schifino. The Nets take Jalen Hood-Schifino at 21. JHS is a player that does not jump off the sports reference page, but absolutely jumps off the TV screen. He plays at his own pace on offense and can often dictate the pace of his defensive assignment with his physicality and 6'5" frame and 6'10" wingspan. He's used to playing with a high usage offensive hub in Trace Jackson Davis, but has the ability to effectively run pick and roll. JHS may not have a superstar upside, but he has the kind of versatility and size that usually leads to long NBA careers. At number 22, the Nets take Greg GG Jackson. No player left on the board has as much upside as Jackson, a 6'9" shot creating wing who could have been playing high school basketball last year. Instead, he reclassified to the 2023 draft and went to South Carolina, where his up and down year has led to him being one of the most divisive prospects in the draft. Jackson will take patience, and there's plenty of ways he can end up not panning out, but a team in Brooklyn with a lot of veterans might be exactly what he needs to grow on and off the court. Very interesting. If you think the Nets are going to skew towards having those like keeping the vet, like having high character guys like a Royce O'Neal, Dorian Finney-Smith, Mikal Bridges, and not go the rebuilding route ever. With Jackson, I probably actually have stronger thoughts on him, which I guess would make sense than Jalen Hood-Schifino. He doesn't remind me of Cam Thomas, but the settling, it's just going to be someone who settles too much. I like that he can generate his own shot, but he's going to be too reliant on that. But that comes into, can you fit into the larger ecosystem? Jalen Hood-Schifino, kind of another guy where it's like, okay, is he too mid-range dependent? And if he's going to play a lot off the ball, I do think he's probably going to have to increase like the acceleration on his, like the catch and shoot speed, really. But I think that's these two, like the value wise here, like the swings at 21 and 22, I like this. And Jalen Hood-Schifino doesn't really feel like a swing, as Rhett sort of mentioned. I had the Portland Trailblazers at number 23. I went with Noah Clowney. I want to see more of a modern big in Portland, and he projects as someone who's already going to be a pretty good rim protector, not necessarily too disciplined on defense, but can also give you some stretch on the offensive end. And so I think he was at like over 4 3-point attempts per game or last year. So like having that volume, it just gives you, they've tried to stretch Yusuf Nurkic out to the 3-point line with some success, but I like the idea of having that player also be someone who's going to anchor your defense effectively. The Sacramento Kings they were also mine. I went with Ray and Rupert, and I just went with hyperactive, like defense guy. They need wing defense. I do wonder though, is he someone who comes in to where, as an example of like, is there anyone who was taken after that? I would say, he would come in and maybe they would play more right off the bat. Maybe not. So like, that makes me feel even better about this. Would you trust, like, I don't know, like, would they get Olivier Maxence Prosper? Would they give him more minutes right away? But like Chris Murray might be a good example. Would they trust him to play more minutes as a rookie with Harrison Barnes outgoing? Just give me the guy with the 7'2" wingspan, so active defensively, and on offense, you have enough like creators, and you can get him going in transition off the ball. Shooting will be a concern. Does he have to live in the corners? Can he get wide open enough looks to where they're going in? I have higher hopes for his jumper, I think, than Davion Mitchell's jumper at this point. That's like faint with damning praise. Who knows? So the Grizzlies at number 25, which is now the Celtics at number 25, by the way, but the Grizzlies at number 25 are the Celtics. Nugs did the draft, went with Trace Jackson. And so this is in the vein of the Grizzlies. So this is tough, but with the blah, 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 Trace Jackson Davis at 25. Memphis needs a big because they are thin in the front court, especially with the recent injuries to Brandon Clark and Steven Adams. They could have also used help at point guard with Josh suspension and Tyus Jones becoming UFA in 2024. Lastly, replacement for Dylan Brooks was also a priority. Decided on TJD because of toughness and all-around game. He's also a 4-year college guy who's NBA ready for win now Grizz. Some that applies to the Celtics, like looking at win now. They don't need a big anymore, though. And I mean, Memphis, like, I guess with the Clark injury, but you have Adams coming back and you have Xavier Tillman and Jaren Jackson Jr. on here. I'd be interested to see. I like that, like, he's a frenetic rebounder. Like, that's just someone who's going to work on the glass. And if you give him enough space, which the Celtics could, he's going to throw some dimes out of the short roll. But like, would Memphis have been the best fit for him there? Would the Celtics take him at 25? Let's say they use this pick. What do they skew towards? Do they take I mean, you're looking at like the guards that are left on the board. I don't know if they go that route. Do they just take a high end swing on a wing? I have no idea. I don't think he would be the pick for Boston. No, that's not on Nugs. Boston did not have this pick when he made it. The Indiana Pacers, speaking of taking swings here, Nicola took Dariq Whitehead at number 26. And I was wondering when he was going to go. The Pacers can afford to take a swing at someone as talented as Whitehead. The injuries are concerning, but he's a big guard who can shoot it really well, and he could probably stay with 1 to 3, which is a premium playing next to Halliburton. If he can recover and start driving to the rim again, he could be a really good sixth man. Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing. I do wonder, and if he's, is he too much in the vein of sometimes he might be a better shooter overall. He was at 36% on off the dribble threes last year, I believe, and was over 40% from three, even with the injuries. Do you trust him as more of a shooter than Benedict Mathurin? And the fact that you have Benedict Mathurin and Tyrese Halliburton doesn't matter if he can't necessarily get to the rim as often. Mathurin was pretty good at drawing fouls, or really good at drawing fouls as a rookie. I like the swing here. And if you believe that his explosion, both on defense and offense, was sapped because of the foot injury, then yeah, go and make the upside bet here. I have zero qualms at number 26. Like just freaking do it. Nathan had the Charlotte Hornets at 27, went with Maxwell Lewis. Why not double down on offensive-minded wing shooters to surround LaMelo and run the floor? Lewis is likely not NBA ready defensively and would benefit from some time with the Swarm. With upside about his variables, his downside, I would love to see the Hornets swing on this efficient and athletic floor spacing wing who can attack off the dribble and catch and shoot. Love the logic there. Everything about him to me physically, though, sort of feels like a work in progress from what I've seen of him. And I've not seen a lot of Maxwell Lewis at all, or even read a lot about him. And I do wonder, like, are you skewing to offense now when you're looking at the personnel? But you could have Brandon Miller there already. It's like that's someone who comes in and I think with his size and could already make an impact defensively. And you do already have, if Cody Martin is healthy, if PJ Washington, Miles Bridges is back, and Mark, you have a lot of like not negative defenders. I would frame it as like you're not looking at defensive liabilities galore. What I really like about this pick, though, that I would say is being able to come in under Steve Clifford, where if you want to learn the defensive fundamentals, that's the coach that I think will do a good job of teaching it to you. We're back to Carrigan Holt with the Jazz, and at number 28, he takes Keontae George. The Jazz are reported to like George, and I'm very, very, very surprised he and Nick Smith Jr. fell this far. I'm more than happy to add his shot making to the squad, and hopefully he outplays his draft position. The Jazz now have 2 shots at finding a guard of the future with Buffkin and George. I told you there would be a ton of guards available later in the draft. You weren't wrong, apparently. I wonder if so. What I like about his fit on the Jazz, because they create so much space, where a lot of what he's doing before now is subsisting on tough jumpers that he seems to fall in love with. That's a concern. If the Jazz can give you more space with a lot of 4-out stuff, or I guess, including him 4-out with Kessler on the floor, or if Olynyk is still there, you can run 5-out until he's going to be surrounded by 4 shooters. Will that help his finishing? Because he's a very iffy finisher. But shot making's at a premium. He's very comfortable knocking down tough jumpers. So I like this pick. I maybe wouldn't have doubled up on guards. But at the same time, I can't bring myself. I'm a big fan of shot creation and from scratch shot making. And Keontae George is definitely someone that can do that. So you guys want to talk about a prospect that I know very little about. James Najee is going to the Pacers at number 29 to Nikolche, who I think Nikolche, I really hope that I'm not Kolev. I hope I'm not really fucking up your name too much. I think you made the most picks in this draft. No, you and Rhett each had at least 3. So kudos to Carrigan had 3. So thank you to all who took teams that had multiple picks. I know that can be a bear. But anyway, so we go with James Najee. The Pacers make an upside pick here by selecting James Najee. They do not have a lot of size, and given how poor their perimeter defense is, Najee's the type of prospect to just clean up some of those mistakes. If that's what he profiles as, go for it. Anyone who's going to be able to play the forward spot, and a lot of people have him billed from what I've read in mocks. This is something I've purely all hearsay for me. That's going to be someone who can help you even protect the rim. And so the Pacers they were the team that got Taylor Hendry or Jarris Walker in this draft. So you added 2 good quality defenders on the front line. I don't hate it. I do not hate it. I would be I want to know, what does he do on offense aside from catch and finish? Because now you've kind of got I guess because you have Miles Turner, it doesn't really matter, but is he too limited? offensively for this team when you have Jarris Walker already, where some of the questions are going to be, does he get pigeonholed to the 4? Is his shooting going to be like as good as everyone thinks it is or can become? But you took 2 bites at the apple then. And then finally, another player who I know very little about from Retro Braden made the pick at number 30 for the Clippers, who were still making that pick as of right now, Brandon Podziemski. And let's see if this pick stays with the Clippers. But Braden writes, one of those guys where he played incredibly in college. His shooting, rebounding, and feel for the game are his strengths. He seamlessly finds ways to be effective both on the ball and off. His pick and roll navigation is light years ahead of most in this draft class too, with his playmaking looking smooth but effortless. His only real downside that I could point out is his point of attack defense, and his wingspan is in comparison to other guys in this range. I think he easily fits what the Clippers are trying to do. You had me at the pick and roll navigation. If you can find someone aside from like the Kawhi and Paul George and the very underused Terrence Mann, and just sort of I was in love with him leading into last season, a little bit more down on him now, but just the very erratic Bones Highland, and then whatever are you bringing back Russ? There's like an abruptness there's an abruptness to the way that Russ navigates pick and rolls, and there's going to be more of like a twitchiness to the way that Bones Highland does. So to have that smoothness and fluidity in the half court, I think that goes a really long way. And if he's going to be able to play and knock down shots off the ball, like that's huge, because you are going to spend some time with maybe Russ, but also definitely Kawhi and PG. I do know that he stands at 6'4", and where does he fit in defensively with this team? If you're going to play him at point, I guess that's fine, or as an off guard. But if you want to get to lineups where are you going to play him with, it feels like playing him with another guard could get dicey, where it's like an Eric Gordon type. And as Braden said, he's not very long. And so I'm looking at like, I know he's 6'4". You're saying he's not long. What does that lead to defensively? But this was fun. I hope everybody enjoyed this. It's an amateur mock draft, and I'm including myself in that. So don't take that as an insult. We'll maybe do this a more extensive process. It was, again, all I did was set up the doc, but it is extra work on my end. My time is, I don't have a lot of free time, but this was fun. I'm glad we get to involve listeners any way we can, like kind of a nice change of pace from mailbags. Please, Discord members, can you count this as maybe the mailbag for a little bit? But until next time, and as always, I leave the shout out to the one, the only, the indelible Frank Ntilikina.